Suicide in autistic people is a really understudied topic, but there's a rapidly growing body of research in this area. And what we know so far is that suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviours are really worryingly common in autistic people. I led the first large-scale clinic study of suicidal thoughts and behaviours in adults with late diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. And Asperger's syndrome is autism in the absence of language delay or co-occurring intellectual disability. And over 9 years of everybody coming into the clinic and getting a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, we asked them, have you ever contemplated suicide and have you ever planned or attempted suicide in your lifetime? And worryingly, 66% of those autistic adults who've been diagnosed said that they had contemplated suicide. 35% said that they had planned or attempted suicide. And that risk of planning or attempting suicide or thinking about suicide was increased if they reported a previous diagnosis of depression, or if they said that they self-reported more traits of autism, so a higher severity of autism and symptoms and behaviours. Since then, we've had explored a number of different aspects of suicidality and autism and tried to understand why this is happening. It seems to be a really, really complex interplay of a variety of kind of personality, cognitive, thinking style, environmental kind of factors. Things like social pressures in particular, we found consistently increase autistic people's risks of thinking about suicide or attempting suicide. And one particular thing that I've been looking at in my research is a phenomenon called camouflaging or masking. And we identified that in partnership with a steering group of autistic adults who we just asked, who had lived experience of suicidality, and we asked them, what should we be looking at, what should we be researching to understand this phenomena? And they said, what really increased our risk was the continual social pressure, and that we had to try and fit in or try to mask who we really were, mask our autism, try and fit in better with neurotypical people in social situations. And that long-term effect, kind of from childhood to adulthood, really, really increased our kind of feelings of thwarted belongingness, not belonging in the world, lack of social support, isolation, difficulty in accessing healthcare. And that was a real kind of melting pot for why we became suicidal. And that kind of lived experience played out in the data. So we have data on this as well, showing that camouflaging one's autistic traits significantly increases autistic adults' risk of experiencing suicidal thoughts and behaviours over and above a number of other risk factors like employment, mental health difficulties, co-occurring developmental conditions. It seems to be a really, really important kind of social factor that we, as a society, we should be doing something about. I think from what the autistic people that we've been working with in partnership in our research, I think a real kind of key learning point is that as a society we have to be more accepting of autistic people and of difference kind of more generally, because camouflaging might not just affect autistic people, it might affect anybody with a mental health condition or anybody who encounters stigma as a part of any kind of condition. One of the key kind of theories that we've been working with is the interpersonal psychological theory of suicide, and that hypothesizes that we all need to feel a sense of belonging. That's a really, really key kind of protective factor against experiencing mental health difficulties and suicidal thoughts. And if autistic people, and perhaps people with other conditions as well, don't feel that they belong, they don't feel like they're accepted as their true self, then this can be a real kind of lifelong risk factor for suicidality, and it's something as a society we should be doing something about. Really excellent question. My research looks at this a lot, and what we found was that although there was a lot of suicidality and autism research happening, none of the research has yet used a tool with any evidence of validity in an autistic population, and there's no suicidality assessment tool available to appropriately and accurately assess suicidal thoughts and behaviours in autistic people. So my research has been trying to develop a range of different tools for different settings to try and address that kind of gap. There's lots of challenges in association with that because autistic people can interpret information and communicate in a very, very different way to neurotypical people. So the kind of measures that have been designed for neurotypical people might not work in the same way for autistic people, and that's played out in my research. The kind of tools that we generally use in the general population don't work in the same way for autistic people, and they do need to be adapted. We have tested a series of adaptations that we co-produced in partnership with autistic people to try and more accurately detect suicidal thoughts and behaviours. But I would say be careful about just taking existing tools that have been developed for other populations and just apply them to autistic people without any adaptation, because you can over or underestimate presence of suicidal thoughts and behaviours if you do that.